Hello, and welcome everyone for attempt number 2 today of Blind Eye Live, where a Streamlabs update screws up all your stuff and you have to go through and fix everything after broadcasting for at least 15 minutes with no audio and nothing, well, no audio working, because once again, updating Streamlabs apparently screws everything up. Sorry if I got a little heated there. But seriously, I go down and I try and simply fix the problem once I realize it, and I have to shut down Streamlabs entirely, restart it, and then I'm able to fix the problem. Because updating apparently breaks your stupid software. I mean, thank you for making such great free software. That works. Sort of. Anyway, welcome to Blind Eye Live. A thunderous edition, I might add, of Blind Eye Live. I am your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, coming at you from Blind Eye Studios, where lightning is striking outside. And the thunder's so loud it sounds like I'm getting carpet bombed by the U.S. Air Force. On the show today, okay, I got to stop. On the show today, we have an Olympics boycott, a boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, because apparently them getting the Summer Olympics in 2008 wasn't enough. So we'll get into that. And the people who are leading a very important and needed campaign to get these Olympics either moved from their location or simply boycotted altogether, because the IOC are full of stupid, unethical, evil people who just care about money. After that, we'll talk about the NBA playoffs. The seeds are set. We know what the play-in tournament looks like. We're going to get an awesome play-in tournament matchup of the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. We'll get into some more news. I have some other headlines pulled up. And then at the end of the show, we will likely, depending on time, we will get into Zach Lowe's articles on his awards ballot. On Friday, he released his ballot about the individual awards, the MVP, Rookie of the Year, whatever, for the NBA season. Today, he has released his ballot, or his article on the portion of his ballot for the All-NBA, All-Defense, All-Rookie teams. And since I have opinions on those things as well, we'll go over it and see, how close he is to my opinions. Because, I think that's fun. With that being said, let's get into this Olympic boycott that I was well into the article on before I realized that no one could hear me. Or at least it wasn't showing that anyone can hear me. So let's start all of this over. Okay, so there is a full-blown boycott push for the 2020 Winter Olympics in Beijing, and I need to answer this text message real quick. Okay, sorry, that needed to be answered. So a full-blown boycott for the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. Groups alleging human rights abuses against minorities in China are calling for a full-blown boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing, a move likely to ratchet up pressure on the International Olympics Committee, athletes, sponsors, and sports federations. A coalition representing Uyghurs, Tibetans, residents of Hong Kong, and others issued a statement Monday calling for the boycott, eschewing lesser measures that had been floated, such as diplomatic boycotts and further negotiations with the IOC or China. Further negotiations with China. Whatever. The time for talking with the IOC is over. Ladan Tetong of the Tibet Action Institute said in an exclusive interview with the Associated Press, "This cannot be games as usual or business as usual. Not for the IOC and not for the international community. The Beijing Games are set to open on February 4th, 2022, just 6 months after the postponed Summer Olympics in Tokyo are to end. Rights groups have met several times in the past year with the IOC asking if the Games be removed from China. A key member in those talks was Zumrate Arkin of the World Uyghur Congress. Tetong was detained and deported from China in 2007, a year before the Beijing Summer Olympics, for leading a campaign for Tibet. Because back then, there was a strong, Tibet nationalist push, because of how poorly the Chinese government has treated them over the decades. The situation where we are now, as demonstrated, the situation where we are now is demonstrably worse than it was then, Tetong said, pointing out that the IOC said the 2008 Olympics would improve human rights in China, which is a joke, by the way. The Olympics has never improved anything ever when it comes to human rights. It does nothing. All it is a cash cow and a sporting event. The 1936 Olympics in in Germany did not do anything to help human rights at all in that country. A war had to be fought. A war had to be fought. Human rights, countries that violate human rights, are not just going to change their minds because you decided to give them a bunch of money. It's stupid. Tetong goes on, if the games go ahead, then Beijing gets the international seal of approval for what they are doing. Exactly. And that's all this is about. It's money for the IOC. That's it. The push for a boycott comes a day before a joint hearing in the U.S. Congress focusing on the Beijing Olympics and China's human rights record, and just days after the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee said boycotts are ineffective and only hurt athletes. Yeah, it does hurt the athlete's ability to compete. But you don't just reward countries for being evil piles of crap. There are concentration camps of millions of Uyghur Muslims in China right now. This is absolutely on par with the Holocaust that Germany did. And I'm sorry, but the 36 Olympics didn't do anything but just help feed Germany's ego. Feed the Nazis' ego. All this will serve to do is feed China's ego and power. That's it. And as sucky as it is to say you don't get to compete or whatever, if you are willing to go and compete in a country that is doing these kind of things, as far as I'm concerned, you have no ethical or moral backbone, and I don't give a crap about you. I mean, I'm giving some strong opinions here, but like, if that's the stance from our Olympic and Paralympic committees that boycotts are ineffective, it depends on what you mean by ineffective. If you mean they're ineffective in that they won't change that company's policies, maybe not. You know what they are effective at? Showing that you're not going to stand by and work with those countries if they're doing those things. This is astounding. People have worked to engage the IOC in good faith to have them understand the issues directly from the mouths of those most impacted, the Uyghurs at the top of that list, and the Tibetans and others, Tatong said. It's clear the IOC is completely uninterested in what the real impacts on the ground for people are. Well, no, they don't. Because this is all about an athletic event and all about the amount of money they can make and profit off of this athletic event. The IOC has repeatedly said it must be neutral and stay out of politics. The Switzerland-based body is essentially a sports business, deriving about 75% of its income from selling broadcast rights and 18% more from sponsors. It also has observer status at the United Nations. And I get to a degree the idea of staying out of politics. I don't love politics and sports myself. But this is different. This is an event you can choose to hold wherever you want and make all that money wherever you want. And you chose to put it in the probably most evil country when it comes to dealing with people they don't like on earth. There is a difference between neutrality and literally profiting off the suffering of others. Like, to me, this isn't a politically neutral thing. Because to me, this isn't even political. Maybe someone else has a different idea about that, and I'd love to hear your argument in the other direction for that. But this is stupid. We are not a super world government, IOC President Thomas Bach said recently. No, you're not a government. But you didn't have to put your games there. China's foreign ministry has criticized the politicization of sports and has said any boycott is doomed to failure. China has denied accusations of genocide against the Uyghur people. A recent U.S. State Department report stated explicitly that genocide and crimes against humanity have taken place in the past year against Muslim Uyghurs and other minorities in the western region of Xinjiang. Tatong said she knows some athletes might be opposed, but she said others who gained traction from the Black Lives Matter movement might become allies. She described this as a gloves-off moment. Oh, no. Well, this is interesting because I guarantee you that if BLM activist athletes are allowed to do whatever they want for Black Lives Matter at the Olympics, they won't support these people. Not at all. However, if the BLM activists do join with these people, I'll gain a little bit of respect for them. Because these people are literally in danger every moment of their life. There are obviously a lot of people who are concerned about the athletes and their lifelong work, Tet Hong said. But in the end, it's the IOC that has put them in this position and should be held accountable. And that's correct. American skier Michaela Schifrin, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, spelled out the dilemma for athletes in a recent interview on CNN. You certainly don't want to be put in the position of having to choose between human rights like morality versus being able to do your job, she said. Tatong suggested coalition members might lobby the IOC's top 5 sponsors, NBC, which generates about 40% of all IOC revenue, sports federations, civil society groups, and anyone that will listen. Advertisers already singled out IOC sponsor Airbnb for attention. Activists have already singled out Airbnb. First is the moral question, Tatong said. Is it okay to host an international goodwill sporting event such as the Olympic Games while the host nation is committing genocide just beyond the stands? Those are strong words. And actually, I do want to say this. This is the other thing. It's an international goodwill sporting event. How are you signaling goodwill to people who are being victimized when you are benefiting their abusers? And if this was really some kind of politically neutral thing, why would having the Olympics in Beijing in 2008 have improved civil rights in the nation? If you're saying that the Olympics improves civil rights in the place, yet it gets worse there, maybe the Olympics does the opposite. Maybe the Olympics decrease civil rights for people. Which I think that's also a stretch, but I do think that when you give to abusers, they take more. That's what happened with Germany in the 30s. The other nations of Europe let them attack and prey on weaker countries and weaker peoples. And eventually, it led to an all-out war because Germany was not going to stop for anyone. Nazi Germany was not going to stop for anyone. In meetings with the IOC, activists said they have asked to see documents in which China has given assurances about human rights conditions. They said the IOC has not produced the documents because they either don't exist or they basically spell out things that they don't want public. The IOC included human rights requirements several years ago in the host city contract for the 2024 Paris Olympics, but it did not include those guidelines. The United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights for Beijing. Although who cares about the human rights guidelines or guiding principles, because they let countries where it's okay to throw people off, or women and homosexuals off of roofs, basically for being women and homosexuals. Paris is the first Olympics to contain the standards long pushed for by human rights groups. Last week, human rights groups and Western nations, led by the United States, Great Britain, and Germany, accused China of massive crimes against the Uyghur minority and demanded unimpeded access for UN experts. Yeah, UN experts. I'm pretty sure China is on the Security Council of the UN. I'm sure those UN experts would do a great job, even if they were allowed full access. At the meeting, Britain's UN ambassador, Barbara Woodward, called the situation in Xinjiang one of the worst human rights crises of our time. How about of all time? The evidence points to a program of repression of specific ethnic groups, Woodward said. Expressions of religion have been criminalized, and Uyghur language and culture are discriminated against systematically and at scale. Your 2022 Olympic Games, everyone. I just find it amazing that as much as people and bureaucrats want to talk and they want to show and say all these super progressive and humanitarian things, that when it actually comes to humanitarian crises, like real crises, nothing's done. Because the Olympics and all their sponsors and a lot of these athletes want to talk about, or will put a bunch of activist stuff when it comes to Black Lives Matter, racial injustice and all these things. But when it comes down to it, when this situation, where there is no question about racial, social injustice, systematic repression and imprisonment on racial, religious, and cultural lines, we've got to stay neutral. This is just a sporting event. You can't have it both ways. You either are all in on it or you're not in on it. You can't step halfway in. You don't get to choose. So, as far as I'm concerned, for every American athlete, any American athlete who chooses to go and participate in these games, because I guarantee you they don't get moved. They're not going to get canceled. That's not going to happen. Any athlete who goes never gets to say a thing about any kind of social injustice ever. Because they, as far as I'm concerned, them choosing to go and participate in these games is them turning a blind eye to what is going on in China. So if you compete in these Olympics, if you compete, you're a hypocrite if you open your mouth about anything else. Because you turned a blind eye. You don't get to preach to people. You don't get to call on people if you go and you participate in these events. Let's see if these athletes will actually put their money where their mouth is. Honestly, I wish the Summer Games in 2024 or this year were in China. So we could see if any of these NBA players, if any of our gymnasts, who are a little more high profile than most of our winter sports athletes, I wonder if they would back out. With that being said, let's get into some headlines that I have pulled up. The Denver Broncos add Minnesota Vikings Kelly Klein to front office in historic scouting hiring. They've hired Kelly Klein as the executive director of football operations and special advisor to general manager George Patton, the team announced Monday. Klein, 30, is believed to be the highest-ranking female scouting executive ever with an NFL team. Wow, 30. Moving up fast. Well, congratulations to her. Klein will be the primary liaison for the team's football operations and oversee various areas of the pro and college scouting departments, including player evaluation and preparation for the NFL draft and free agency. She also will oversee the Broncos' video and equipment departments. Klein spent 10 seasons in Minnesota, where she recently served as the manager of player personnel and was also a college scout. The Wisconsin native got her start in the NFL as a public relations liaison with the Vikings in 2012, while finishing her undergraduate degree at the University of Minnesota. She entered the scouting department as an administration intern in 2013. She became a scouting assistant in 2014 before being promoted to the team's college scouting coordinator from 2015 to 18. As manager of player personnel, college scouts, Klein scouted the Midwest region and was the liaison between all of the scouts and the front office. Her job in scouting carried operations responsibilities in Minnesota, where she scheduled and facilitated pre-draft visits, as well as interviews for the Vikings at the annual scouting combine. Okay, so they described this, but it sounds like she wasn't a scout. It sounded like she was like an administrator and an organizer. Are they sure this is manager of player personnel / college scout or manager of player personnel and college scouting? Whatever. If she was also a scout on top of all that, that's an impressive resume for, 9 years. Oh, this was funny. Miami Marlins CEO Derek Jeter sells mansion Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Tom Brady has been renting. Former New York Yankees superstar Derek Jeter has sold his waterfront mansion in Tampa for $22.5 million, meaning Tom Brady might be headed to new rental digs. The 7-bedroom, 8-bathroom estate was sold Friday, said Smith and Associates, the real estate firm that handled the transaction. The firms did not disclose the buyer, and the sale had not yet been recorded Monday by Hillsborough County, a process that can take several days. The home had been listed at $29 million. He sold it for $22.5 million. The Baseball Hall of Famer lived in the home part-time until his retirement after the 2014 season. He and his family moved across Florida after he became a part owner and CEO of the Miami Marlins in 2017. Brady had been renting the mansion since April 2020, shortly after the star quarterback signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after leaving the New England Patriots. He and his wife, supermodel Gisele Bündchen, recently purchased land on an exclusive island off Miami to build a home there. Brady led the Bucs to a Super Bowl in February. Well, to a Super Bowl title in February. Purchased land on an exclusive island off Miami. My God, imagine having that much money. I mean, seriously, imagine having that much money. Like, I wouldn't even want to spend money on, like, something that crazy and extravagant. Like, I'm just sitting here like, imagine the drum sets I could build if I had access to, like, you know, I don't have to worry about a thing money. Also, imagine the sound system I could build in, like, a venue. Let's see. Jeter bought the property in 2005 for $6.3 million. Raised the houses that were there and built the 22,000 square foot replacement, which has a wine cellar, movie theater, and air-conditioned 6-car garage. Well, how about that? You bought it for $6.3 million, sold it for $22.5 million. That's pretty sick. But imagine buying a property and then just burning all the houses on it to the ground. Because I believe that's what razed means. Otherwise, just destroyed them all. Smith and Associates realtor Stephen Gay told the Tampa Bay Times that Brady and Bündchen were accommodating and didn't turn down any requests to get the property show ready for a prospective buyer. Huh, those are some cool alternate jerseys. All right, let's see. What else do I have lined up here? Boom. Oh. Washington football team's all-time sacks leader Ryan Kerrigan has joined the Philadelphia Eagles. That is a big signing. I was honestly kind of hoping the Titans would try and bring him in. 4-time Pro Bowl edge rusher Ryan Kerrigan, the Washington football team's all-time sacks leader, announced Monday that he is signing with the Philadelphia Eagles. Kerrigan, 32, was a first-round pick by Washington in 2011 and played the first 10 years of his NFL career for Washington, racking up 95.5 sacks and 147 quarterback hits. He started just one game in 2020 and played 38% of the team's defensive snaps, by far the lowest of his career, but still had 5.5 sacks and 5 tackles for loss. Which, for those of you doing math, up until this season, he was averaging an even 10 sacks per year over his first 9 seasons. That's impressive. Kerrigan has 13.5 career sacks against Philadelphia. Tied for his most sacks against any one team, that other being the Dallas Cowboys. I know I probably wasn't your favorite player over the past decade, but Eagles fans, I'm fired up to be playing for you guys now. LFG. Let's friggin' go. Kerrigan wrote on social media. Kerrigan joins a defensive end rotation in Philly that includes Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and Josh Sweat. He'll be playing for new defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, who is expected to ask his linemen to read and react more, in contrast to former DC Jim Schwartz's constant attack style. I hate read and react. Let your men just go. They've got Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett, guys who are entrenched and are bona fide studs in the league, Kerrigan said of the Eagles. But I know they rotate their guys a lot. Whether I'm a starter or a reserve, I still imagine I'll get a lot of playing time. That was a big thing for me. Washington had left the door open for a possible return, according to team sources, but it also has starting ends Montez Sweat and Chase Young, and it drafted 2 more in William Bradley King and Shaka Toney. Washington also has 2 other young ends in James Smith-Williams, a 2020 7th-round draft pick, and Casey Toohill. The team wanted to see how its young ends had developed before exploring a legitimate reunion with Kerrigan. In January, Kerrigan told ESPN, "Always envisioned playing my entire career here." But he said by season's end, and as a pending free agent, he had gotten used to the thought of playing elsewhere. He remained confident in his ability. Kerrigan said the chance to play Washington twice did not factor into his signing with the Eagles. No, not at all, he said. I'm not like, oh, I've got to get revenge on Washington. The place has been so good to me. No, that wasn't a thought at all. I like that mentality. And finally, for the stuff I already have, this is big news. So, broadcaster Marv Albert retiring after NBA Eastern Conference Finals. Marv Albert is, like, for me, he is the voice of the NBA. His Hall of Fame career has spanned nearly 60 years. Jeez. There's no voice more closely associated to NBA basketball than Marv Albert's, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said in a statement released Monday by Turner Sports. Albert plans to retire after calling the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals, ending a career that began on the radio in 1963. Albert will call the series for TNT. He has been with Turner for 22 years, 19 as an NBA play-by-play announcer. Man. My 55 years of broadcasting the NBA has just flown by. And I've been fortunate to work with so many wonderful and talented people, Albert said. Now I'll have the opportunity to hone my gardening skills and work on my ballroom dancing. I like that. Albert, known for his signature "yes" call, turns 80 next month. He has covered everything from football and boxing to hockey, baseball, and tennis. But his voice is known to most through basketball, having called 13 NBA Finals and 25 All-Star games for NBC and Turner, along with the Dream Team's romp to the gold medal in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. And as far as I'm concerned, ESPN, ABC should work out some kind of deal to have him call the finals, as far as I'm concerned, but whatever. Silver said his earliest memories of basketball were listening to Albert and New York Knicks games. Many fans who came to the game during Jordan's run to 6 championships with the Chicago Bulls in the 1990s heard the same voice first. From his remarkable run as play-by-play announcer for the Knicks to the prominent national roles calling our marquee games on NBC and Turner Sports, Marv has been the soundtrack for basketball fans for nearly 60 years, Silver said. Albert became the voice of the New York Rangers in 1965 and the Knicks 2 years later. He was on the radio call in 1970 when the Knicks won their first championship, a memorable moment in NBA history after an injured Willis Reed emerged from the locker room moments before Game 7 against the Los Angeles Lakers at Madison Square Garden. I wish I could do a good Marv Albert impersonation. And here comes Willis. The crowd is going wild. I can't do Albert's voice because I don't have that like New York voice, but his voice is just freaking ingrained in my head. Because I've watched so many games he's called. And him being the voice of a bunch of NBA video games. He began doing Knicks games on TV for MSG Network in 1986 until he and the organization parted in 2004 over disagreements with his salary and style. Good job, James Dolan. Albert was also fired by NBC in 1997 after pleading guilty to assault in a lurid sex case when a longtime lover accused him of biting her on the back more than a dozen times and forcing her to have oral. Okay. Yeah, I never knew about that because I was like 4 and hadn't even heard of the NBA yet at that point. That's awkward. Albert called 8 Super Bowls and 8 Stanley Cup finals. Man, I mean, you talk about this guy's accomplishments and you throw that at the end and it's like, Jesus. Why does everything in 2020 have to leave you feeling just a sour, ugly taste in your mouth? Texas Tech guard Mac McClung to sign with agent, remain in NBA draft. Yeah, bet you he gets drafted. Not. Let's see. Okay, let's check out some NFL headlines. Oh, this is Bill Barnwell predicting when quarterbacks will play their first games. Nothing in the chat. All right. Let's see. Other than the stuff I've already read. Ball, set to be restricted free agent, would love to return to... Oh, this is actually the main headlines. So that's talking about Lonzo Ball. Jags cut running back Armstead after season loss to COVID. We'll check that out. Oh, yeah. Albert Pujols has officially signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers after the Los Angeles Angels cut him. That's big news, as far as I'm concerned. Let's pull up. We'll hit these stories and we'll come back. Jacksonville Jaguars waive running back Raquel Armistead. What in the heck is happening here? Why? What is this, and why is it on my screen? I don't. I don't know where that came from. All right, Jacksonville Jaguars. That actually, y'all may not have seen that on y'all's or on the stream, but something just popped up on my screen. I was like, what? Jaguars release running back Raquel Armstead. The Jaguars have waived running back Armstead, who missed the entire 2020 season because of complications related to COVID-19. Armstead, 24, was twice placed on reserve COVID-19 lists last season. He spent 19 days on the list the first time, then dealt with a groin injury and another illness before going back to the list. Players are placed on the reserve COVID list if they test positive for the virus or have been in close contact with someone who has. Armstead was a fifth-round pick in 2019 and ran for 108 yards on 35 carries as a rookie. He was likely to have a larger role in the offense last season as the team's decision to cut Leonard Fournette. But undrafted rookie James Robinson went on to win the starting job. And he ran for 1,070 yards and 7 touchdowns and caught 49 passes for 344 yards and 3 more scores. The Jaguars drafted former Clemson running back Travis Etienne, 25th overall last month. Also on Monday, the Jaguars announced they've signed 6th-round draft pick Jalen Camp, a wide receiver from Georgia Tech. So, yeah, Armistead, many were speculating after they cut Fournette that Armistead, they were really liking Armistead and he was going to be their main guy. And considering they didn't draft a running back last year, they did pick up Robinson in undrafted. It was pretty much expected that Armistead was going to start. And then basically like it said, he basically missed all of last year for the most part. And he got destroyed in the camp competition by Robinson. So they decided to cut him. Sucks for him. Former Georgia men's basketball guard Severe Wheeler transfers to Kentucky. Okay, so I thought this was a football thing. It was basketball. All right. So let's check the NBA headlines. Let's see. Wizards' Beal hamstring is not 100%. Great news for them. LeBron touts Steph for MVP ahead of play-in tilt. I'm not totally going to argue with that, although I do think it's going to be Jokic, and he's deserving. But those are the only two deserving guys for me. But Jokic has just played so many more minutes than Steph this year and more games. Let's see. All right. So here are Zach Lowe's. I'm going to hit the standings first before I come back to that. So we're going to look at the seeding for the playoffs. I'm not going to pull up like the actual thing, but so here are your playoff matchups in the Eastern Conference. You have the Sixers and Nets will face the two winners of the play-in tournament games. Then you've got the Bucks as the 3 seed. They'll face off with the Heat. So round 1, we'll get a rematch of last year's, conference finals or second round where the Heat upset the Bucks. The Knicks and Hawks will go to battle in the 4-5 matchup. That'll be a good series, I think. In the play-in tournament, you have the Pacers and the Hornets fell below the surging Washington Wizards. The Wizards had the tiebreaker over the Pacers, and the Hornets they kind of started a little bit of a skid when LaMelo Ball was out injured, and then he came back, but they still lost like their last 5 games of the season. So they're kind of on a cold streak going in. The Celtics ended up 500 because they lost. Well, they were on a 1-game losing streak there, but they were like, I wanted to say they were like 35 and 32, something like that. I thought they were 36 and 33. I thought they were on a 3-game, but whatever. They lost a bunch of they went 4 and 6 in their last 10 games to end up back at 500. A lot of that to do with Jaylen Brown the last week. Well, should I say Jaylen Brown went down injured, broke his wrist. He's going to be out. He was easily their second best player this season, and in some games he was their best player, as far as I'm concerned. So they're going to go up against the Hornets. So arguably you have the 2 worst teams, I would say, right now, out of these, at least how they're playing right now. The Pacers have gone 500 their last 10 games. And out of these teams, the Wizards have surged late. They were 6 and 4 in their last 10, but they've been really good, or much better since the All-Star break. After basically like the first half of the season, they were arguably they had stretches where they were arguably like one of the 5 worst teams in the league. Honestly, right now, if I were to say, the Wizards are my favorite to come out of the play-in. So the Wizards will play the Pacers, the Celtics will play the Hornets. And if I'm being honest, I think the Hornets have a real shot against the Celtics team. Of course, the Bulls, who it seems like their midseason trades did more to hurt their playoff chances than help them. They fell out. The Raptors just collapsed at the end of the season, losing 9 of their last 10 games. I mean, that's just brutal. And I think it's actually like even worse than that if you extend it past 10 games. Then, of course, the Cavs, Magic, and Pistons. So then in the Western Conference, you have the Utah Jazz as the 1 seed, a game ahead of the Phoenix Suns, who finished with the 2 seed. They will play the 2 teams that come out of the play-in. After that, you have the Nuggets, who managed to stay afloat without Jamal Murray, although they did kind of slump towards the end of the season a little bit. 6 and 4 in their last 10, which isn't terrible. But we'll see how good they are without Murray, although Michael Porter Jr. has really stepped up. And they've been playing pretty freaking good basketball despite having not just him out, but also Monty Morris, without Murray, Morris, and I think Will Barton's missed a bit of time too. The LA Clippers are the 4 seed. The Nuggets own the tiebreaker there. So the Clippers are the 4 seed. So the Nuggets will be playing the Trailblazers, who were able to, on a tiebreaker that they owned over the Lakers, they ended up 6th. The Mavericks owned a tiebreaker over both the Trailblazers and the Lakers, so they get the 5th seed. So the Nuggets will be playing the Blazers and be able to exact revenge for a couple years ago where the Blazers upset them in a second-round playoff series. And the Lakers will go up against, the Clippers will meet the Mavericks in the first round for the second straight year. The Clippers kind of ended on a sour note because they went 4 and 6 in their last 10. The Mavericks and the Trailblazers have been on fire, finishing the season 8 and 2, respectively. The Lakers actually kind of picked it up towards the end of the year, finishing 6 and 4 after a bit of a slump with a bunch of while they were dealing with a ton of injuries. But yeah. But they still got caught by the hotter Mavericks and Trailblazers. So they're in the play-in. The Warriors finished on an 8-2 tear, including finishing on a 6-game win streak. The Grizzlies finished the season on a 6-4 run, finishing 4 games above 500. And then the Spurs actually ended, or just started tumbling at the end of the year, going 2-8 over their last 10, and barely staying in the play-in. Although they were able to, because the Pelicans didn't really surge either. They finished 4-6 over their last 10. They lost their last 4 games. They actually were in position to catch the Spurs, and they just kept losing games. And of course, they ended up tied with the Kings. The Kings actually made a late push, but it wasn't enough. They went 6-4 over their last 10. And then you have the lowly Timberwolves, Thunder, and Rockets. The Thunder managed to catch the Timberwolves, and the Timberwolves actually finished playing some really good basketball this season. So, but right now, if we're just looking at by records, the first pick the top pick in the draft is Houston's. Then it's the Pistons, the Magic, and then the Cavs or Thunder. The Cavs and Thunder in some order will be 4 and 5. The Timberwolves have the 6th best lottery odds. And then it's the Raptors, and then the Bulls, Kings, and Pelicans are all 31 and 41. So, for some reason, I was hearing that the Lakers and Warriors were going to be playing each other in the play-in. So, are they going to have 7 and 8 versus 9 and 10? Or have the play-in games haven't already happened? I don't think. Let's see. I wonder if they have like a playoffs bracket somewhere. Let's go back to the NBA homepage here. Seriously, is there like a bracket somewhere? Well, let's see if this will lead me to like a bracket of sorts. Yep. I think, well, or not. Yeah, so they don't have their opponents yet. I didn't think the play-in had happened just yet, so let's go back. I guess they're not going to release the bracket until after the play-in games have happened. Okay, so the first of those games is tonight. So the Eastern Conference games are tonight. So you got Charlotte versus Indiana, and you have Washington versus Boston. So they're pitting 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. I would have thought it would have been 7 versus 10 and 8 versus 9. So that's interesting. So maybe I didn't understand how the play-in was going to work. I thought it was 7 and 8 and not, or 7 and 10 would play and 8 and 9 would play. And if the 7 and 8 seeds won, they just advanced. But if they lost, the other team got another game. So is it going to be like if whoever wins the 7 and 8 matchup moves on, and then the loser of that plays whoever wins the 9-10 matchup? Because that actually, to me, makes even more sense. Because they did better in the regular season, so it gives you more incentive for playing better during the season. I'm going to say Washington and Charlotte win those games. I hate to say that about the Pacers, but I kind of just want to... I really love like this young Hornets team. As much as I want to see Boston win, I just don't trust them at all. So let's look at let's end this thing off by looking Gosh darn it. Let's look at Zach Lowe's ballots. So we are going to... Let's start with his individual stuff, and then we'll come back to the team awards, because those came out... This article dropped Friday. The team one dropped today. So this is Zach Lowe's MVP ballot. So he's got Jokic 1, Embiid 2, then Curry, Giannis, and Luka. I'd put Curry ahead of Embiid. I get the idea that Embiid is more impactful defensively and whatnot, but that injury time he was off, the Sixers still played really well without him. And especially as well as the Warriors have played down the stretch, I just feel like Curry deserves a ton of credit for how well he's played. And if he had more talent around him, like if Klay was healthy and back, I just feel like that team would be somewhat better. I don't know. Curry has just been a one-man Death Star. And because of the injury absences for the Nuggets, I actually feel like Jokic is a better version of like the Steph Curry case, because the Nuggets have been so much better. And even with Jamal Murray being out, the last month or so because of injury, I think like the last month, Jokic has just been so good that, and the Nuggets have continued to play really well and be one of the best teams in the league. I just think Jokic is obviously the MVP. Embiid, I'd be fine with having Embiid third. I get having Giannis fourth and Luka fifth, although personally, let's see who else he has on his in his consideration, because I think he goes in that after Jokic, because he does like this big long spiel on Jokic. Let's see. There was something he mentions in the article about there's a campaign against him for MVP being led by... Now this is the funniest part. Nick Wright, the dumbest and worst NBA analyst out there, who works for Fox Sports. He is probably the biggest LeBron James apologist there is. Like, there are a lot of people who don't like to give LeBron enough credit for his ability on the court. Nick Wright is in the complete opposite direction. So you have like Skip Bayless, who will never give him credit. Nick Wright never will not give him credit. So Wright is pushing forward this sentiment, or this narrative, that a Jokic MVP will look silly in retrospect. Wright specifically is lobbying for Chris Paul. Chris Paul has been really good this year. The Suns have been great. I don't believe he's anywhere close to the most valuable player in the league. Could you consider putting him at the back end of your top 5? Sure. But he's not better than Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's not better than Luka Doncic. He's not better than Steph Curry. Like, if you replaced Chris Paul with Steph Curry in Phoenix, I guarantee you that team is the 1 seed right now, the way Curry's playing. Although, to be fair, maybe the fit would be different. Maybe it wouldn't work as well. I just think Curry's a better player, so that team would be better. So anyway, I think Nick Wright's crazy. And Jokic is the best passing big man we've ever seen in the league. This guy is this guy is going to go down as one of the 10 best passers in history. Like, this guy, the best comp we have for him to date, if we're going to go by size and playmaking, is Magic Johnson. Like, he's basically like a mixture of Magic Johnson and Bill Walton. He's incredible. So, as far as I'm concerned, he's the MVP. Clearly, the MVP this year. So let's look at some of these other spots. So he talks about, Antetokounmpo definitely being his fourth. So then he gets to his fifth spot, and it's Doncic, Paul, Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler, Damian Lillard, or Julius Randle. Butler and Leonard have the best statistical cases, which that's... There is no statistical case for Paul or Randle. And that is not to say that Randle has bad stats. It's just not on the level with these other candidates. Because, see, for me this year, so you see his five up here, and he has Jokic, Embiid, Curry, Antetokounmpo, and Luka. I would actually go with Jokic, Curry, Embiid, Giannis, and then Lillard would be my fifth. But that's a tough choice. It's basically a coin flip between him and Luka for me. So then we get to Rookie of the Year from the MVP. I think LaMelo Ball is, even with the injury time out, like, he was easily the best rookie this year. Now, Zach puts Anthony Edwards second and Tyrese Halliburton third. I have Halliburton second because I think he's a better team and winning player right now than Edwards. And he has not been given as much of the reins as Edwards. Now, Edwards has functioned for stretches of this year because Towns and Russell were out as a number one option. And he's put up some interesting numbers, but his efficiency is terrible. And while maybe going forward he has a more upside as a prospect than Halliburton, Halliburton's been the better player this year. But I would say that those are arguably the top three rookies, for sure. Although, let's see. There are a couple of other names you could throw in the mix with Edwards for the third spot. Maybe Emmanuel Quickley of the Knicks. He's been a really good role player. Maybe Isaac Okoro of the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I'd say Edwards is probably safely third. And I'm leaving out two or three other names, but sue me. They'll come up in the all-rookie team. Let's see, Defensive Player of the Year. So this is interesting. So he's got Gobert, Green, and Simmons. And I think that's a good trio. But I would put Simmons' teammate. He plays less minutes than Simmons, but Matisse Thybulle has been insane. That guy, on a per-minute basis this year, he is 17th in blocks per game, first in steals, and first in deflections. I mean, and heck, let's just take that out. Thybulle, I think, is averaging like 20.6, somewhere between 20 and 22 minutes a game. And this man is 22nd in the league in blocks. I think he's like 5th in steals and like 10th in deflections or something like that. Or he's somewhere between like 10 and 15 deflections, and I think he's like 5th or 6th in steals per game. That's just his raw per game numbers. Like, Thibault's been insane, and he blocks more jump shots than anybody. He has over 50 blocked jumpers and floaters this season. Second place for that, I think, is Gobert, and he's at 38. So my 3 would be Gobert, Green, and Matisse Thybulle. And it's close between Gobert and Green. And because of his versatility, I kind of want to go Draymond and reward him for the season he's having. But Gobert, when you just look at the numbers over this whole season, how durable he's been and everything, he allows the rest of the defenders on his team to stick closer to shooters because he can single-handedly erase the painted area and even a lot of the area around it because he is so long and agile. So, I think it has to be Gobert. After that, Simmons is totally fine for that 3rd spot. If Embiid hadn't have missed time for injury, he probably makes that. And then, of course, you've got Clint Capella and Miles Turner. Capella has been Gobert light in a lot of ways this year. Turner has blocked a ton of shots. He's missed some time to injury, though. And he's not as good all around as everyone else, but Turner's been incredible protecting the rim. Jakob Poeltl has also been really good, especially since becoming the Spurs' starting center. So, yeah. And then we'll then Coach of the Year. If we're going to take, I think his list is good. Because Monty Williams has taken the Suns from a lottery team, although one of the better lottery teams last year, and they made that crazy run where they went undefeated in the bubble. They still didn't make the playoffs, but they were the best team during the bubble restart. That kind of end of the season stretch. I think he deserves to be Coach of the Year because the Suns almost finished as the top team in the West. And there were a lot of people doubting the Suns actually being, I thought that they were potentially like the 3rd, 4th best team in the West. I thought they were going to compete to be one of the top 3 teams in the West. And they ended up 2nd. So I think that's deserving. Tom Thibodeau also deserving. What he's done with the Knicks this year, you could argue that he should be Coach of the Year. And if he does win, that's fine. And this is the thing with Coach of the Year. There's so many ways you could vote for it that, to me, Coach of the Year is one of the hardest ballots to put together. And then Quinn Snyder, the Jazz, despite not having enough star power, and everyone's still questioning their star power in the playoffs, they had the best record in the Western Conference. They are the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. And I think they have basically the same record as the Sixers, or a better record than the Sixers. So, I mean, that team's incredible. Quinn Snyder is just an elite coach. And if he wins Coach of the Year, it will be much deserved. And there are a bunch of other, guys. You have Eric Spoelstra, who's had to deal with so many injuries with the Heat, and he managed to get them out of the play-in. They're the 6th seed. And they're playing really good basketball right now. Frank Vogel kept the Lakers afloat, although they did end up in the play-in. Although I don't really necessarily think Frank Vogel's like Coach of the Year. And maybe it's just because I think Spoelstra's a better coach, but I wouldn't vote either of them for Coach of the Year. As great as the Heat are playing right now. And then let me see. Who else does he have? Another guy I would say who's done an amazing job this year is Taylor Jenkins with the Grizzlies, because the Grizzlies weathered a ton of injuries early in the season to Morant, Jaren Jackson being out the entire year, a bunch of guys being out with COVID, and it's just like everyone who plays for the Grizzlies is a solid NBA player, it seems like, or better. And Kyle Anderson had like the best year of his career this year. Like super impressive. And even though it's like half a season, Nate McMillan flipping the switch for the Hawks, I think is huge. But I don't know if you can give Coach of the Year to a guy who took a team that should have been in playoff contention but was a little bit below and got them playing where we expected them to be. Because if anything, the Hawks, he just turned the Hawks into his Pacers teams. Doc Rivers has turned the Sixers into the best versions of themselves. There's a definite argument that he's elevated that team. You have Malone with the Nuggets. The Nuggets dealing with injuries down the stretch, but he's also had a ton of star power. I love Mike Malone. He's one of my favorite coaches. I don't think he's the Coach of the Year this year. And then you have Steve Nash coming into a crazy situation for like the first time you've ever been a head coach. And you've had to deal with Kevin Durant missing big stretches of time, Kyrie Irving missing big stretches of time, James Harden missing stretches of time, and also dealing with integrating him after that trade. But he does have an elite roster and elite amount of talent. But he's been super creative. Like what they've done with Bruce Brown, turning him into this point center, like point guard on defense, but center on offense, like, is wild. Or should I say, he's really like a Swiss Army knife defensively, and then just the world's weirdest center and dive man. And Ty Lue's done a solid job with the Clippers, although they kind of fell off towards the end of the year. But if I were to say, like, I agree with that top three for Coach of the Year. And I'm a little biased on Taylor Jenkins and Steve Nash, because Nash was like my favorite player ever, and Taylor Jenkins is the coach of my favorite team. But if you had to force me to pick one coach this year, I'd probably go with Monty Williams as well. Sixth Man of the Year. So Sixth Man of the Year is always interesting because there's a bunch of different types of candidates, and it's telling that to me, or that arguably the top four candidates all are from the same two teams. So Zach has it as Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson, with Tim Hardaway Jr. of the Mavs in third. Ingles and Clarkson are teammates on the Jazz. Clarkson and Hardaway, points-wise, I think are like the top two bench scorers in the NBA. Ingles doesn't have as much scoring as they do. I think he's averaging like 12.5 points a game. But he is a much better passer than all of them. He's one of the best. Actually, he's one of the best and most consistent pick-and-roll playmakers in the league. He's a much better defender than both of them, even though the other two are much more athletic. Although Hardaway and like Clarkson are really trying, and I think Hardaway's gotten to where he's close to average defensively. Clarkson's still below average, but he's fighting more. But I think Ingles, I'm totally cool with the Ingles 6th man of the year. Although for most of the season, I definitely thought it was going to be Clarkson. But I think Lowe makes a really good case. Although Clarkson has been on fire recently. He finished the season with like 5 straight 20-point games, including a 41-point game against the Warriors. So Clarkson probably is going to end up winning this. But I think Ingles is a better all-around player. And like Ingles arguably should be starting. Another guy who's some other guys beyond that top 3. So you have Hardaway Jr.'s teammate Jalen Brunson, who's been awesome. Derrick Rose, who's been playing well all year, but really has turned it up for the Knicks. You've got Miles Bridges, who has been playing off the bench for the Hornets this year, and he's been awesome. His improvement's been great. Halliburton has been the 6th man for the Kings this year, and he's been so good. Chris Boucher of the Raptors. Doug McDermott has been awesome for the Pacers this year. He's been enjoying a career year, basically, particularly attacking the rim. He's leveraging his shooting in a way that is allowing him to aggressively attack the rim. Kuzma for the Lakers, sure. Markkanen has been playing off the bench for the Bulls for most of the year, and he's been, pretty good. Thaddeus Young was a guy who arguably was deserving of mention, but he's really fell off after the trade deadline. And one of my other favorites, Dario Saric of the Suns, has also kind of fallen down the pecking order in the rotation for the Suns after playing one of really a critical bench role for them for most of the season. Here's another good one. TJ McConnell as the backup point guard for the Pacers. His defense and playmaking has been a huge lift for them. But let's look at these stats. So Ingles is 2nd on Utah in assists per 36 minutes. And I would agree with Zach Lowe in saying that it's an argument that he's the best. He is the best player on Utah in terms of orchestrating out of the pick and roll. And he's been arguably the most ridiculous shooter in the league, non-Steph Curry division. 49.4 overall, 45.6% on threes, 59% on twos. Clarkson, as good as he is scoring the ball, and you can argue high degree of difficulty, 42% shooting overall, 34% from three, 52% on twos. But Ingles is a better shooter. And while you could say Clarkson jacks more shots, Ingles is shooting 8 threes per 36 minutes. That's ridiculous. And he's hitting them at a 45.6% rate. And he also shoots he'll shoot threes off the bounce going either side, which it's a lot easier fading to your right than your left as a righty, or vice versa, to your right than your left if you're a lefty. And he's one of the best players in the league in terms of his advanced statistics. Just all the advanced numbers love him. The controversy here is, and this is where Zach gets to it, Ingles and Hardaway have started 57 games between them. So it's a 72-game season, and a lot of this year. Usually it's 82. A lot of people don't like running the don't like putting starters or players that start more than so many games on their sixth man of the year ballot because, well, they're borderline starters, not really like bench guys. And it's like, well, that's kind of what your sixth man is. He's the sixth best player on the team. If someone's out injured, that guy's probably coming into starter. He's going to play a bigger role. And on really good teams, they might start depending on matchups. I don't have as big a bugaboo. Now, if the guy's obviously like a starter on the team, you don't put him in sixth man of the year. Ingles and Hardaway have not started a majority of their team's games. Just full stop. They are mostly bench players. So I would say that I don't mind them them starting a few more games. As Zach explains it, for me, part of the value in being sixth man is the ability to start when called upon. Lamar Odom deservedly won in 2010-11 after starting 35 of 82 games, and he's absolutely right. And Lamar Odom was the deserving sixth man of the year that year. Now, Zach says he almost pivoted to Rose at number 3. Not sure any reserve has had a bigger impact than Rose since the Knicks acquired him. New York has outscored opponents by an absurd 12 points per 100 possessions with Rose on the floor. Which also, for like closing games, this is another thing about the sixth man. Sometimes he doesn't necessarily start, but a lot of times that guy is closing games. Rose, when he replaces Elfrid Payton in a lineup with the rest of the Knicks starters, that has been one of the best lineups in the league over the second half of the season. And also, they have a bench unit. Any bench unit featuring him, Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, and Rose's old running buddy from Chicago, Taj Gibson, during the Thibodeau Bulls days. Those 4 guys, plus any of the other Knicks bench or any other Knicks bench player, those lineups have been doing really well. I've already read this article, and I've looked into some of these numbers as well, and it's absolutely true. But, and this is why he didn't make Lowe's top 3, and I respect this. Rose has only played in 49 games, 34 with the Knicks. Hardaway has been an Iron Man. He's only missed 2 games. So he's played 70 of 72 games. That's impressive. And the Mavs have dealt with a ton of injury and COVID issues as well. Hardaway has logged almost 700 more minutes than Rose. That's a huge gap. And he's averaging 16.8 points on 45% shooting, 39.4% on threes. And he's also been having the best stretch of his season at the end of the year, just like Clarkson. And I think there's an argument that Hardaway belongs above Clarkson because while he's a minus defender, he's a better defender than Clarkson. This is the argument for Jalen Brunson. For me, Brunson while he's not as athletic as Hardaway or Clarkson, he's a better defender. He's thicker built. He's stronger. He's a sneaky good post defender. He's got that Kyle Lowry in him. He's a really good, consistent shooter, and he's a better playmaker than those other 2 guys. And he has this awesome, like, screen and pop game with Doncic. Actually, they have a good 2-man game regardless of who has the ball and who's screening. Honestly, if I were to give you my 3 for sixth man of the year, though, I'd probably go Ingles, Brunson, and then I'd go Hardaway over Clarkson. But it's really close. To me, those are the top 4. For Sixth Man of the Year. And if I had to name a 5th, I'd probably go with TJ McConnell personally. Because his defense is ridiculous. Or Matisse Thybulle. Just because of his defense. And then you've got Most Improved. And this is the hardest award, literally the hardest award every year. Sixth Man's a little tough, but Most Improved, because improvement can mean so many things. Because sometimes you could argue that the MVP award winner in a couple years, like when Giannis won his first MVP, he was arguably the most improved player that year as well. Because he made a huge leap. And he didn't make the top 3 of this, but Jaylen Brown, for a lot of the season, was arguably my number 1 guy on this list. Because he was playing... Now, his scoring numbers have dropped a little bit, but there was a point in the season where he was averaging like 26 or 27 points a game, I think. I mean, I think by the end of the year, he's down somewhere like 23 and a half, 24 points a game, which is still crazy and still better than he was at. But previously, like his previous best season. So Brown, I would probably have Brown on this list. But Julius Randle has been the best player on the Knicks, and he's improved in areas where he's had some numbers before, but it's his all-around play, and his defense is better. His playmaking is so much better. And his shooting. Like, his shooting numbers are ridiculous this year compared to previous. Like, he's never been near this as a three-point shooter, let alone an off-the-bounce, like, mid-range and three-point shooter. And I say we reward him and the Knicks for the season they've had. Michael Porter Jr., I think, is definitely deserving of the number 2 spot. He was playing really well anyway. Over the first half of the season offensively, he was averaging 17.5 points a game on great shooting numbers, and he was showing improved defense from last season, although he wasn't looking super consistent. Since the All-Star break, and really just before the All-Star break, he was basically becoming like a 20-point-per-game scorer, and he was playing much better team defense and making like heady plays in defense, getting chased down blocks, jumping into the passing lanes, really showing his high basketball IQ. Over the last month, though, since Jamal Murray's tragic ACL tear, Porter has been insane. He's been arguably the best scorer and go-to scorer on the Nuggets at times, even better than Jokic. He's been playing on the ball a lot more, and his efficiency hasn't suffered. He's been shooting even better from the field, from all areas. Arguably over the last month, he's been maybe the most deadly non-Curry shooter and scorer, simply because he's 6'10", 6'11", with a amazingly repeatable and perfect jump shot, that it doesn't matter if you contest it, because he's so tall and long and athletic, like, you can't really get a good contest on him. Like, contested jumpers are easy for this guy. And he's been playing the best defense, and he's taken another level up in defense. To where, like, he's not a liability on defense, and not even just not a liability. I'd say at this point, he's probably a net even defender. And in some games, he's even better. Some games, he's an asset defensively when he's really dialed in. And then he has Jeremy Grant, number 3. Grant has been incredible, and he's probably overtaxed as a number 1 option, but he's been the number 1 option for the Pistons. He's been scoring 20 plus, or he's averaging over 20 points a game. His efficiency hasn't really cratered or anything like people expected. And he's a really good defender. But he's still not my number 3 because a lot of it still has to do with volume. Like, I get, like, he's elevated in role, but that's a lot of the problem, and I'd still probably put Brown ahead of him. Although maybe you'd say Grant made a bigger jump. So I think there's definitely an argument there. He has a bunch of guys here who are like guys who have jumped from, fringe or not even really playing to like really, really important role players. Out of this group here, my 2 favorites out of the group are Lou Dort and Taylor Horton-Tucker. Kevin Porter Jr. just hasn't shown really enough yet. Like, he hasn't played enough yet. So that's an interesting group, but I wouldn't put any of those in my top 3. Or maybe in my top 5. Here's some other guys. So this is kind of that next group. These are the guys who are already really good. So he's got Jaylen Brown here. Tobias Harris, who is having the best season of his career this year. And, could argue for a spot. Terry Rozier, who is my number 3 player. Zach LaVine, who he's cooled a little bit, but he made a huge leap as a number 1 option this year. But he was already such a good scorer that I don't know if it was really that much or how big that leap was. And Donovan Mitchell's been amazing, but he was already so good to begin with. And same with De'Aaron Fox. And I'd say as well Bam Adebayo. Now, Bam Adebayo has been his mid-range jumper and how good his jumper is getting has really unlocked things for Miami's offense. And Fox had another small leap this year, but I think Rozier would be my number 3 guy. Lonzo Ball is another guy that I feel should be mentioned. He's been so much better as a shooter this year. And Zion in year 2 has been amazing. But you kind of expect that. So then you've also got Darius Garland as a second-year player, but he was really bad for stretches of last year, and he's really improved as a playmaker and as a shooter this year. Miles and Michael Bridges have been great. Bridges would probably make my top 5. OG Anunoby's been really good. You've got Brunson, Boucher again. Barrett almost got my number 3 spot. Kyle Anderson had a great season. I mean, this is really the hardest because there are so many guys you could say improved a ton. It basically, for me, after Randle and Michael Porter Jr., my last 3 guys that it came down to were Jaylen Brown, Terry Rozier, and RJ Barrett, and I chose Rozier. Rozier has had really good stretches of his career, but he has been one of the best high-volume three-point shooters in the league this year. He's been playing scrappy as crap defense. He's really improved as a playmaker, although he's still not amazing. He's a passable playmaker. And I expected a year 2 jump from RJ Barrett. Terry Rozier has been so good this year. So that's what I would say. Or that's how I have it. But if you had Jeremy Grant up there because he was the number 1 option, that's fine. He just doesn't dish enough assists for me in that role. 2.8 assists. That's just not enough. And then we'll round out the show today. We'll go through his team awards. So let's see what Zach Lowe's first team All-NBA looks like. So he's got Curry, Dame, Luka at forward, then Giannis, then Jokic. This is how I would put it too. Doncic has the size of a forward. They play a lot of the time with Brunson and Hardaway or Trey Burke or Josh Richardson on the court, and a lot of times 2, sometimes even 3 of those 4 guys on the court with Doncic. I say he's a forward. So I would put him there. On the second team, You've got Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and Joel Embiid. Third team, you have Kyrie, Bradley Beal, Julius Randle, Paul George, and Rudy Gobert. See, I would put Beal. I'd argue you put Beal on the second team at guard, and I'd put Butler as a forward, and I'd put LeBron on the third team because he's missed a lot of time. That's my opinion, and I don't mean as a disrespect to LeBron James. But I'd put LeBron on the third team, and he's missed a lot of time. But I think Harden deserves to be. I'd argue Harden deserves to be on the All-NBA team. But if you weren't going to do Harden, you could move George to guard because he plays a lot at the 2, honestly. And he's got Gobert as third-team center behind Embiid. I think that's actually pretty fair. Let's see who... Which, he's right. Okay, so for most of the past 2 months, he had Leonard at his second forward spot. 25 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5 assists. He's close to 50-40-90 territory in shooting. Borderline all defense work. Because he takes some more possessions off these days, which is fine. But Leonard finished with a bit of a whimper, 20-plus points in only 2 of the Clippers' last 18 games. And that is an issue. And 500 less minutes than Doncic. He toyed with Butler, who had the league's most underappreciated great season. Let's see. I don't see how Butler cannot make All-NBA. And that's the thing. Butler missed time too. And the league smartly made Doncic eligible at forward and guard. Sorry, I'm looking to see. Man, and this is the other thing. When you're looking at the centers who didn't make All-NBA, Bam Adebayo, although he does play power forward some. Sabonis, who kind of plays power forward next to Miles Turner. Clint Capella, who's having a great year. Vooch, who was having a great year. And he's still been having a great year with the Bulls, but he was torching it with the Magic. Let's see. And Zach brings up a good point here. It will be interesting to see whether LeBron does make All-NBA, which he probably will, but he's not a lock for any of the All-NBA teams. He played 45 of 72 games. 1,504 minutes. James Harden played 44 games and 1,609 minutes. And Harden in Brooklyn before he picked up that, what was a hamstring injury, he was arguably mounting an MVP run because he was having a crazy good season. But I do think Harden rightfully should get knocked for the bit of the season he played in those 8 games in Houston. Just, ugh. Here's another crazy thing. So he points this out. Julius Randle played 1,100 more minutes than LeBron this season. Like, wow. But this is my thing. This is a single season award. And I get LeBron James is, great. Like an all-time great. But Randle was a more consistent and more impactful player this year because he was on the court more. Some guys that ended up being cuts from here. So he's talking about on the third team. With Gobert and Randle locked in for the third team, that left 3 spots for these players. Irving, Beal, and George, who made it for him. Harden, Donovan Mitchell, who arguably deserves to make it. Devin Booker, Zion Williamson, Ben Simmons, and Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum gets hurt because the Celtics didn't play as well as they should have. Some other guys who could be considered: Drew Holiday, who's having one of the best seasons of his career. Zach LaVine, Trae Young, Mike Conley. I don't take that seriously as much as I love Conley. Westbrook, Jaylen Brown, and De'Aaron Fox. But yeah, if I'm putting my teams together, just looking at these, I think he nailed his first team. That's how I would put it. If Jimmy's not available as a forward, I get having him at guard. If I'm being honest, then I'd move Julius Randle up to second team All-NBA. I'm taking LeBron off the ballot, and I'm putting Tatum on my third team All-NBA. Tatum's just been so good this year that I feel I just couldn't. I don't know how I could not put him on an All-NBA team with LeBron basically missing half the season. Same goes for Harden. Chris Paul being definitely the glue on the Suns and elevating that team. I definitely understand putting him second team. So yeah. That's I think what I would do. And I also I don't even know if I'd put Paul George. I'd need to look at George's stats probably. Because honestly, I'd probably put Bam Adebayo at forward over George because of just his defensive impact and his improvement as an offensive player again this year. It'd be him or Sabonis as like a power forward over George, I think, for me. But maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I'm just dismissing Paul George. Donovan Mitchell would definitely be a guy I'd like to put on there too. But there just aren't enough guard spots. So let's move down here to all defense. This one's easier for me. I'm not putting Giannis first team all defense. I don't think. Let me see who he's got here. So he's got his first team is Simmons, Butler, Draymond, Antetokounmpo, Gobert, and then second team he has Smart, Holiday, Thibault, Bam, and Embiid. So he's got Thibault second team. I'd argue Thibault, even though he doesn't play as much as many minutes as some of these other guys, is actually a better defensive player and deserves a first team slot. Like, I'd argue for pulling Antetokounmpo off of that because he hadn't been as good defensively as he was last year, and putting Thibault up there. But let's be deferential here, and deferential to the amount of minutes played. But I don't know if I don't think I'd put Butler ahead of Holiday. See, I'd put Holiday above Butler defensively. Holiday would make my first team. And then I guess I'd put Butler second team. I'd also argue that I would put Adebayo above Antetokounmpo. But I don't know. Which, one of the things with the Bucks this year is they really changed up their defenses this year. But I think that's a big part of his little bit of a step back defensively. Michael Bridges would definitely be a hard cut. Capella, of course. He was the third best defensive center this year behind Jokic and Embiid. Gobert and Embiid. OG Anunoby's been playing amazing defense this year too. Lou Dort, who I mentioned in the most improved category, awesome defensive player. He looks like a Marcus Smart type. Let's see. So here's where he talks about Adebayo. And this is why I would argue potentially putting Adebayo above Antetokounmpo this year. He handled switches better than Antetokounmpo this year, honestly. Adebayo switched onto a league-high 511 ball screens this season. And he's the best big man switch defender, as Zach Lowe said, and I agree with that. Those switches bog down opposing offenses, dragging them into isolation mode. Adebayo defended 220 isolations, second most in the league. Opponents scored only 0.94 points per possession on those isolations per second spectrum. And see, that little bit of information kind of makes me want to move Adebayo up my Defensive Player of the Year rankings to put him third. And honestly, if I had Thibault third in Defensive Player of the Year rankings, I should put him first team all defense. So I guess I'll change that. I had Thibault third. You do have to think about minutes and role. And I would put Adebayo as my third defender. So I'd put him on my first team defense. Or I mean, on my first team all defense over Antetokounmpo. And I'd move him to second team. But I think I'd keep everything pretty much the same otherwise. See, I mean, my thing is, if Bridges is listed as a guard, I would consider putting him over Marcus Smart. But Thibault has just been so good that as good as Anunoby and Bridges are, I'd put Thibault ahead of him too. He's just that good. He's ridiculous. And Thibault's not as valuable as those players offensively. And it's one of the reasons, like, he only plays 20 minutes a game. But he is so good on defense. Like, there's a block he made in a game against the Suns where he lets Devin Booker get a little bit ahead of him, coming through some screens. And then he shoots around because his teammates are back on the screener. He zooms around them and blocks Devin Booker's corner 3 attempt. Like, just erases it. He is the best I've ever seen at erasing jump shots, and particularly getting around screens to do so, and he'll block jump shots from behind. It's incredible how many he blocks, and cleanly. Like, and after he blocks this Booker shot attempt, the camera's following him and teammates are dapping him up. Like, Dwight comes over and daps him up. Dwight Howard, multiple-time former Defensive Player of the Year, daps him up, and you just see his face. He's got this face like following Thibault as he walks, just like, he's just looking at him like he can't believe what he just saw. Thibault does that like once a game. And that's just his shot blocking exploits. He averages over one blocked shot per game, and he only plays 20 minutes a game, not even half of the minutes of every game. And Zach Lowe even says, guys who play great defense with shouldering a two-way burden, playing over 30 minutes per game, deserve some deference compared to guys like Thibault, who are, more limited type role players. Like, he agrees that the Thibault type should have a higher bar. But whatever that bar is, and I like the way Zach Lowe puts it, whatever that bar is, Thibault clears it. He didn't just clear the bar. He leaps so high over that bar, the bar might as well not even exist. And Zach, I think he's correct in potentially saying this. He might be the best perimeter defender in the world. He's one of the best that he's ever seen. And I agree. And Kevin O'Connor did an awesome video on The Ringer for his show The Void on Thibault and his defensive prowess. And he uses a ton of great illustrations, like showing different plays he's made. That's where I saw one well, I'd seen the highlight before, but it was part of that package was like Thibault making that play. I'd not seen the part of the video though where like Dwight Howard looks like utterly amazed as Thibault's walking by. And he covers so much ground. This guy can stop multiple actions. You know, back to back to back to back. Like he can, it's like sometimes it feels like he's defending half of the court at once. Like half of the offensive zone at once. He averaged 5 combined blocks and steals per 36 minutes this season, which is like historically insane. Not historically great, historically insane. If you are a ball handler and Thibault is in front of you, it's like young Kawhi Leonard, except that young Kawhi Leonard has the aggression of a velociraptor. The Sixers, who have the league's second defense, get 3 guys. This is what Zach is saying. The Lakers, Jazz, and Knicks, who own the 1, 3, and 4 defenses, only get Gobert. The Lakers have played incredible team defense, but to some degree, especially during this injury stretch, a lot of teams have rested key players in games against them. The Lakers do play elite team defense, but I do think they get a little bit lucky with some of the shots that miss. Because if I were to take any defense in the league, it would probably be the Sixers and then the Jazz. Those, to me, are the top 2 defenses. And then the Knicks own the 4th best defense. And the Lakers and Knicks didn't get anyone. And to be fair, that's kind of fair for the Knicks. Like, to me, their best defensive player is Mitchell Robinson. They have a lot of really good perimeter defenders, but they don't have any especially great ones. And it's kind of the same thing with the Raptors. The Raptors have played great defense for years. Raptors didn't get anyone on either of these defensive teams. Now, they were terrible this year, but it wasn't as much because of their defense. So, anyway, moving on to our all-rookie teams. This is always a fun exercise because after, like, the first, 3 or 4 guys every year, and then really once you get to the second team, once you get about halfway through the second team, it's like you're literally just trying to pick the shiniest of dull stones in a trash pile. Because most rookies just aren't ready to be good players yet. So easy choices, Ball, Halliburton, and Edwards. The easy top 3 for me for Rookie of the Year. And then I like his next 2 guys. And there are no position requirements for this because there may literally not be a good rookie center one year, or there may literally not be, it's really imbalanced. So you just do away with the positions. Desmond Bane of my Memphis Grizzlies. I think that's a great choice. He would have been my 5th guy after Quickly as well. But really close. And I think all the guys that I would have considered for that 5th spot will be on the second team here. But I think this is really good. Bane has come in, been an elite shooter, a really good role player. He's played like a veteran role player from the jump. He's been really important to the Grizzlies staying afloat throughout all the injuries and COVID and COVID scares. Quickly has been one of the most important players for the Knicks this year. definitely. Then you have the second team, and he has the same second team I do. So Jayshawn Tate has been really, really good for the Rockets. He's been, other than Christian Wood, he's the brightest spot on the team when it comes to like their future. He's been really good. Isaiah Stewart of the Pistons has been awesome. He almost made my first team. It came down to him and Bane. And I probably a little, based on my own bias, chose Bane. But thank you, Zach Lowe, for confirming my bias. And but Stewart's been awesome. He's going to be a really fun big man. He's really active and switchable defensively, voracious rebounder, and paint defender. And his offensive game has actually been a little better than has come along a little quicker than people expected. So I think he's going to be a really fun player, and he's got a bright future. And I kind of grilled that pick originally. So I will accept being wrong on Isaiah Stewart. Now I'm so glad Beef Stew is proving me wrong, because we all need some more Beef Stew. Love his nickname. His teammate, Sadiq Bey, who went at pick 19, that I couldn't believe lasted that long, having a great year. His shooting has been awesome from the jump. He looks like they have some really fun building blocks in Detroit. And Killian Hayes is coming along, the first of their 3 first-round picks. Peyton Pritchard of the Celtics and Facundo Campazzo. Pritchard started kind of hot and then kind of fell. He's kind of, I don't know. I kind of fell off watching the Celtics because they just seem like doomed to be average. But Pritchard was really important for them earlier in the season without Kemba. And he's been really good. He was one of a couple guys like him and Malachi Flynn. I expected one of those guys to pop this year in year one. It ended up being Pritchard, even though I was leaning towards it being Flynn. And Facundo Campazzo has come over from Spain, where he was a huge star in the Euro League for Real Madrid. And he's been really good playing tough defense and playmaking off the bench and really stepping up with this surge of injuries from the Nuggets. I think he's earned his spot. There's a couple guys that were really hard cuts, though. I actually thought this was a good all-rookie year. So, and I think this is right from Low here. There were 8 must-haves. Plus Tate, Stewart, and Bey. So he talks about that group of 5 after the top 3 guys. Bey led that group in points. Tate led in many of the advanced stats. The advanced stats love Jayshawn Tate. I almost wonder if they love him a little too much, though. Stewart led in win shares and was probably the best defender among them, though Tate was rock solid switching across almost every position. And that's true. And so what he did is because those 5 guys were so statistically close, he went with the 2 guys who put up those numbers on winning teams. And I think that's a big deal. Making winning contributions and significant contributions as a rookie to good teams, that's more valuable. Plus, you've got way more pressure on you. And quickly has kind of chilled a little over the last month, but still, 39% from 3 was one of the best bench players in the league, and he will shoot from anywhere. He's got a great, and he does. He has a great floater game, and he plays really, really good defense. Now, Bane didn't average 10 points a game, which was less than Bay and Tate, but 43% from 3. And he was shooting, and basically it seemed like he was shooting 5 a game. So he's basically hitting 2 threes a game. And he played solid defense across multiple positions. And he's kind of a solid all-around player. He can make some plays off the bounce. He can be a tertiary playmaker in your offense. He can run a pick and roll. He's just he doesn't take any options out of your tool belt as a coach. So then you've got after those last 8, and this is what just ends up happening. You have like your locks, and then you kind of have like tiers, and so you end up like at the bottom of it, you've got like a tier of guys that it's like, I don't necessarily feel great about any of them, but I don't feel bad. And this year, I actually think we had a deeper group of like for the last 2 than some years. Some years, it's like we get to the bottom, it's like, really, Willie Hernan-Gomez? Ugh. So he started off with Chuma Okeke and Jalen McDaniels as his last 2, but Okeke hasn't played in 3 weeks, which sucks for him. Although I still like his long-term potential. And McDaniels faded down the stretch as a distant 5th option for the Timberwolves, which the fact that he's even starting there is really cool for him. It does say something about the Timberwolves, but like when you're playing most of your minutes with Towns, Russell, and Edwards, and then Malik Beasley, like, you're not getting the ball much. I mean, he was a solid player, and I totally understand some people putting him on the end of their second team. Good multi-positional defender, and 36% on 3s, 53% on 2s. Really nice. Like, I actually thought people were undervaluing him after that year at Washington, because we did the same thing to Isaiah Stewart as well. Like, those 2 guys got undervalued because they were playing for an unimaginative coach. Tyrese Maxey is another guy playing for the Sixers. He finished strong, but it took him till late in the season to really break into the rotation. He talks about Kenyon Martin Jr. Kind of had the same thing in Houston. Cole Anthony, if he wasn't injured for so much season, same. I agree with that. Isaac Okoro, I'm kind of surprised. Oh, yeah. Wait a second. He didn't have Okoro or Williams. I didn't even notice that or think about that. That's who I was missing. Williams was really good this year. Did they just stop playing him after the All-Star break? Or like after the trade deadline? Because I was hearing about him a ton until like the last like month and a half or so. Let's see what his explanation for this is. Okoro has been, and so let's see. These guys finished 2nd, 4th, and 6th in minutes. Okoro 2nd, Williams 4th, and Maledon 6th. But they don't make it. Let's see what his explanation is, because I wasn't thinking about them either. I totally forgot about Williams, personally. Okoro has been more daring on offense lately, flashing off the catch aggression. That bodes well. Williams is going to be good and maybe really, really good. He profiles as a major plus defender with a silky jumper. But he and Okoro did so little offensively on a per-minute basis, it's hard to know what to make of their candidacies. Yeah, because Williams had to deal with playing with Zach LaVine and Kobe White and Lauri Markkanen and Thad Young and Nikola Vucevic. And I'm forgetting another guy. But he played with a bunch of guys who dominated the ball. Williams played really good defense, and when he was given the chance, was really efficient offensively. Who did a little more heavy lifting, one for a decent team and one on a very good one. So let's see what he's got for Campazzo. Campazzo is not a normal rookie, of course. He's an international star. But he's on the ballot, and his fill-in work as a starter down the stretch won him the nod. Campazzo is a pest on defense, an all-world passer. That's true. He's a great passer. It hit 35.2% on threes, just enough to keep defenses honest. I'd say that his fill-in job down the stretch, I could see how that earned him a nod. Pritchard's role fluctuated, but he was helpful whenever Brad Stevens called on him. He's a good defender with a knack for steals, and shot 41% on a healthy number of threes. Pritchard can run some backup point guard and play alongside one or both of Marcus Smart and Kemba Walker. Man, that's really hard for me to leave. It's really hard for me to leave Williams off. But I understand where he's coming from here. See, Bay played a much bigger role in his team. It's going to be really funny, like, a couple years from now, when, like, Patrick Williams and Isaac Okoro are, like, which, that's not a guarantee, and I think it's less of a guarantee with Okoro. Like, I think Williams is a potential, like, top 3 player on a really good team. Or even, like, top 2 player on a really good team. I think Okoro is probably going to be he's going to be like an elite level defender who might develop into a good enough offensive player to where he's like, maybe he could become like Andre Iguodala with the Warriors. Maybe not quite as creative of a playmaker, but maybe that's kind of his mold. Whereas I don't know if Peyton Pritchard's going to be anything other than like a backup point guard. Like, top-end 6-man. Even Campazzo, as good as he is, like, he's a rotation guy. But those guys are already those things. My thing is Williams starts. Okoro starts. And as important as Pritchard was at points this season, like, Campazzo has really helped hold the fort for a contender. I'm going to drop Pritchard. I'm going to put Williams. I can't not put Williams. I think Williams is too good. And Theo Maledon, if he was playing on a team that wasn't, or such a big role in a team that wasn't the second half of the season Thunder, he'd probably have a better chance at, like, a candidacy. But, I mean, Maledon's playing for a team that's mailing it in. But he's really good, and I thought he was one of the steals of the draft. I couldn't believe he fell as far as he did. So, anyway, I have spent plenty of time today on the podcast. Went longer than I meant to, really. But had fun doing the show again today. Thank y'all for tuning in. Let's see here. If you enjoyed the show today, please drop a like. Really does help the channel. Even if you get bored, if you'd be so kind, like maybe leave it running in the background so I get the watch time. That's such a scummy thing to say. Oh, man. But no, seriously, like the show. If you want to help me out, the more you watch, the more it helps me in the algorithm. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Like, I don't want to trap people. Please leave a comment. I do read the comments if you're checking this out after the fact. And please hit the subscribe button if you want more. And hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Or, I guess, a live stream, because I haven't started uploading videos yet, because I suck at editing and graphics, if you can't tell. So, with that being said, thank you very much for giving me the time of day. And I will see y'all tomorrow, hopefully. It might be at a different time. Like I said at the beginning of this one, some question about the weather and having to update Streamlabs kind of pushed me a little late today. Depending on my schedule tomorrow, I may or may not stream at the normal time tomorrow. I will stream at some point tomorrow. Who knows when? But anyway, thank y'all, and y'all have a great rest of your Monday.